Welcome into a Red Friday edition of Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. Fulton Cast, you're here with you, riding solo for the final time for now. There'll probably be another time randomly down the line. Like, this isn't the final time ever. There'll be other times. But for this little extended period that I got to have power and be in charge, which, oh boy, was this a mixed bag of the last 6 days. But for the final time in this little interlude, I will be with you riding solo. Jake will be back on Monday. So our next show, it will be myself and Jake LeBon with you, as we usually are. But we're going to have fun with me running the show just one final time here on a bit Red Friday edition. We'll get you ready for Chiefs and Raiders coming up on a jam-packed edition of Mic'd Up. Today, we're going to give you my Chiefs keys to the game, my big Chief, what the Chiefs need to do to beat the Las Vegas Raiders coming up on Saturday afternoon. We're going to go around the NFL. A lot of playoff situations are still up for grabs coming into Week 18, which is exactly the way it should be. We'll break that down. We'll also break down the results of an NFL's owners meeting Zoom call right now. The NFL last night put out their proposal for what to do with the AFC playoff situation in the wake of Bills and Bengals being ruled a no contest, which, if you have not heard, Bills and Bengals is a no contest. It will not be resumed at all, ever, period. That game has been thrown out. It is a no contest. The NFL has a different proposal for what they should do for the rules. They are voting on that and speaking on that as we speak. 24 of the 32 owners must vote to approve the NFL's proposal for it to change how we are going to do the AFC side of the playoff bracket. If they don't agree, we'll go to business as usual, which is just things being decided by winning percentage as is defined in the rule book. And there's no other special concessions, no neutral sites, no coin flips, nothing. I will break all of that down coming up in the 1 o'clock hour when we go around the NFL. Everyone loves the list, as we always do. We will have on second thought, as always, on this Friday edition of the program. I'll preview the national title matchup between TCU and Georgia. We'll take a small look at that. We'll do a deeper projection with Jake coming up on Monday, but I'll take a quick little insight coming into this weekend and just what it could mean for the Big 12 as a whole. We have two great guests coming on the show today. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, Bill Williamson of SB Nation, the Raiders SB Nation site, silverandblackpride.com. Bill will join me to chat all things Raiders, get a look inside, go behind enemy lines, look at how the Raiders have gone this season, get his thoughts on what has probably been a fairly disappointing season for the Las Vegas Raiders this season. And then our good friend Seth Keysor of The Athletic and the Chief in the North newsletter, he's going to join me at the top of the 2 o'clock hour to chat all things Chiefs, and also take a look at Patrick Mahomes and some of the great things he has done this season. As always, if you want to be a part of the show, there's two great ways to do it. You can join, as always, on the Big O Tires text line, 785-272-9429, or we are live streaming on YouTube, as always. Go to youtube.com, go to Sports on 580, our YouTube channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, if you please would, if you would like. You can join in on the show, watch the show on our YouTube live stream, and then, as always, join in the live comment section of the show as well. But where we kick off today's show is where we kick off many Red Friday editions of the program with our Chiefs keys to the game. And this one for me has a couple very simple ones for this matchup with the Las Vegas Raiders coming up on Saturday from Allegiant Stadium, or, Arrowhead West, if that's what you want to call it, considering Patrick Mahomes has never lost. He's undefeated on the road in divisional games. But they will be in Las Vegas at the Giant Roomba. That is a very nice stadium. I have to give them credit. It looks very nice in my opinion. But my first big key in this matchup, no big plays. Think back to that matchup that was 30-29 for the Chiefs versus the Raiders way, way back in Week 5. Remember, their first touchdown to Davante Adams was on 4th and 1. Chiefs played press man, no help over the top, and Derek Carr lofted a 58-yard touchdown pass to Davante Adams. Think about the touchdown they got late to get it close. They made it 30-29, which ended up being the final score. A long, deep pass to Davante Adams for a touchdown. Which, looking back on it, I really didn't think about this going forward. Davante Adams had 3 catches in that game against the Chiefs. Now, 2 were touchdowns, and he still had 124 yards, but he only had 3 catches in that game. Very, Very intriguing. But it was big plays. It was also big runs by Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs had over 140 rushing yards in that matchup against the Chiefs. He ripped off a lot of big runs. Now, who knows if Josh Jacobs is going to play coming up in the matchup on Saturday. We're still waiting on those final words. I'll bring up that with Bill and get his opinions and his thoughts on what's going to happen with Josh Jacobs coming up when I chat with him at the bottom of this hour. But if Josh plays, that's important. Even if not, this Raiders team still has a way to make big plays, and that is something you have to limit. Devontae Adams is the best wide receiver in football, and I will hear maybe some tiny arguments for others, but overall, consistent, high-level body of work, it's Devontae Adams and it's not much else. To steal a line from our good man, Brendan Dorzinski, he's top 2 and he ain't 2. You have to keep a lid on this Raiders offense, make them drive the football. Jarrett Stidham had a good game against the 49ers defense. I can't lie. It was very not impressive to see against that good 49ers defense. You have to find a way to keep him under wraps. You have to find a way to make the Raiders have to drive the football. Don't give up those big explosive plays, particularly for touchdowns, because if there's a way that a bad team and a team with an offense that sometimes isn't fully clicking, if there's a way for them to find not even a rhythm, but just stay in a game, it is by those big shot plays, because then you're not asking them to drive for an 8-9 play touchdown drive. They only need 3 to 4, and anybody can find, a little bit of a spark in 3 to 4 plays. So limit the big plays. That is one of my biggest keys in this game. Don't let the Raiders try and find these few random ways to get touchdowns. The other one is this, and it's the one I'm, along with Jake, we'll just keep talking about until the cows come home. It's turnovers. Now, you were lucky with a neutral turnover differential against Denver, which does help. That is the way you counteract it. But think about the game against the Broncos just last Sunday. There were points left on the board, partly because of turnovers. One of Patrick Mahomes' turnovers was an interception in the end zone. That's at least 3 points, if not 7, that are taken off the board because of a turnover. Kadarius Toney's fumble back at the 10, swung it the other way for Denver. But still, turnovers are massive. They are important. This is a bad Raiders defense. And I mean bad. Hot garbage, insulted dumpster fire level bad. Don't let them get some cheap plays with turnovers. Turnovers, when it comes to matchups that have a large differential in talent level for teams overall, when a very good team faces a very bad team, an equalizing force in that is turnovers. And for the Chiefs, they need to find a way to not turn the ball over, which has been their problem ever since playing this Raiders team. It was against this Raiders team that they had no turnovers, and then the turnovers started. From Buffalo onward, the only game in between there was really Seattle with no turnovers, was when this turnover problem began for Kansas City. You need to get back to that form. You need to get back to that form you showed round 1 against the Raiders when you played a clean game. You have to find a way to make the Raiders work for every little thing that they are trying to do. You need to make them work for every single inch, every single yard. Don't give them short fields via turnovers. And this applies to the special teams as well. If you're Kadarius Toney, 1, stop fielding punts inside the 10. I don't know why the Chiefs are the only team that fields punts inside the 10. It's the silliest thing in the universe that they do that. But overall, don't turn it over. Catch things cleanly, but then as you're running, don't fumble the football. Carry it tight and close. Mahomes, make the proper reads. Don't force too many passes. It's been the thing that has affected them all season long, because this game still means a lot for Kansas City. If they win, they are the number 1 seed, which, rule changes aside, whatever happens with rule changes aside, they get a bye week. They're going to get a bye, which is important. That rest, that relaxation, those different things you can do to try and get healthy, that is important. There is something still heavily on the line for this Chiefs team. So you need to give this game 100% of your effort and 100% of your focus. And I think that's more important than anything else, is the focus for this team. Because when you think about it, it's one of those games where, the Chiefs go into it. They're so heavily favored. They're 9-point favorites per FanDuel as of this moment in time. They are very much the heavy favorites to win this game. They can sometimes, especially with Kansas City, lend itself to being a closer game than it needs to be. This Raider team showed a lot more fight against the 49ers than I expected. I thought once they benched Derek Carr, I've never been a fan of Jarrett Stidham. I think, he was fine in college, nothing too great, too fantastic. And then never showed anything in the few times he was, gotten some reps in New England before he came to Vegas. I didn't think much of him. So I thought they were throwing in the towel wholeheartedly because they have nothing left to play for. They're planning for draft seeding, which if they lose, it's better. They get a chance to try and maybe draft somebody to take over at the quarterback position when they likely trade Derek Carr this offseason. There are ways to beat dysfunctional teams, but there are also ways to lose to dysfunctional teams if you don't keep them with their problems at the forefront. Patrick Mahomes has a history of playing very well against the Las Vegas Raiders for the most part. They are a team that he normally can beat. Has, I believe, and I'm going to double check this, lost to them one time in his career. But it's normally a team he plays fairly well against. And if you look at his stats, he's 8-1 in his career against the Las Vegas Raiders. He has thrown 26 touchdown passes against the Raiders. His most against any divisional opponent. Against the chart, which is, his most against any opponent individually, but division is where you get most of the games. So that's why I go with that. He's thrown 21 against the Chargers, only 18 against the Broncos. He has 26 touchdowns to 3 picks in his career against the Las Vegas Raiders. Of the divisional opponents, we talk about how he's 11-0 against the Broncos. But if there is a team he plays the best against in this division, it is these Las Vegas Raiders. Now, part of that has to do with the fact that the Raiders defense hasn't been good since the Truman administration. But it's also just a mindset of focus and trying to play this team. Everyone needs to be completely locked in for this matchup because there is so much still to play for. If you lose and Buffalo beats New England, which I have to assume they will, outside of football circumstances aside, I have to imagine that Buffalo will win that matchup against New England coming up on Sunday. So if so, you have to win to get your 1 seed, at least get your bye. To make sure that you can find a way to at least get some extra rest heading into the playoffs above anything else. So there's still a lot to play for in this game, and it starts with don't turn the ball over and don't give up those big shot plays. Those are my 2 keys for the Chiefs coming up on Saturday afternoon when they take on the Las Vegas Raiders with a 3:25 kick in Las Vegas. My big chief in this one, I'm going with the guy that had not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 touchdown receptions last time these two teams met. I'm going to go with Travis Kelce. He had the 4 touchdowns. He was actually largely kept in wraps. He had the weirdest stat line really ever. 7 catches, 27 yards, 4 touchdowns. It was weird. Vegas found a way to play him better than I expected. But in a big game, when the Chiefs need to get a victory and need to play well, you need your guy, your stud, outside of your MVP quarterback, to play well. And I think Travis Kelce will find a way to play well coming up on Sunday. But we'll see how it goes. But all I hope is the Chiefs can walk out of Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas with a victory. We'll take our first time out here on Mic'd Up. Coming up next, the results are in for the NFL's owners meeting, impromptu owners meeting this morning. I'll let you know what they've decided for the AFC playoffs coming up next. Welcome back into Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. The owners' meeting has been concluded. The NFL owners today have approved the proposed rule changes to the AFC playoffs, including potential neutral site AFC championship games. So, here is how it goes. Here is the basic way I can break this down for the Chiefs. If they earn the 1 seed, they get the bye. That is the most important thing in my opinion. If the Chiefs beat the Raiders on Saturday, they are the 1 seed, they get the bye. So they will not play the first weekend, which kind of makes next week's show, we wouldn't have to prepare for a Chiefs matchup, which Jake and I figured out. But man, that's a weird thing to do in the middle of the playoffs, but a fun one. We'll be happy about it. So the Chiefs would not play next week if they earn the bye. Here is how the neutral site goes, and I want to thank our good friend Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com for helping break this down, because even I was confused last night as all this came out. But Matt helped me break it down. We figured this out. So, if the AFC title game is between two teams who their seeding and number 1 seed potential was affected by the no contest of Bills and Bengals, then the AFC title game will be played at a neutral site. So what does that mean? That means if the Chiefs win and the Bills win this weekend, if the Chiefs and Bills meet up for the AFC title game, that will be played at a neutral site, because Bills and Bengals outcome would have determined which of these two teams would have been the 1 seed. The Chiefs would not have had the 1 seed had the Bills beaten the Bengals. They would have it if the Bengals had won. Since we do not know, that game would be played at a neutral site. If the Bills and Bengals meet up in the AFC title game, which, Lord, I hope not, but we have to talk about the potentialities, that game would be played at a neutral site, because we don't know who would have had home field, because that would have been determined by the winner of Bengals-Bills if Bills and Bengals both win this weekend. Now, as long as the Chiefs win on Saturday and do claim the number 1 seed, a Chiefs-Bengals AFC title game would be played at Arrowhead Stadium, because the Bengals need the Chiefs to lose this weekend for them to have any chance at the number 1 seed. I know this can all be very confusing. I'm trying to put this out in the simplest way possible. I do apologize if it's still confusing. So, in the shortest, simplest way, for those of you in Chiefs Kingdom to understand this, if the Chiefs win on Saturday, the only way the AFC title game is a neutral site game is if the Chiefs play the Bills. If they play anyone else for the AFC title and they make it that far, that game would be played at GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium, because no one else, if the Chiefs win on Saturday, would have had the chance to be the number 1 seed if everything with the Chiefs fell out the way it did. The Chiefs at 14-3, the only team that would have had a claim to the number 1 seed outside of them would have been the Buffalo Bills if they had also been 14-3. So, all that complicated matter aside, that is the gist of what would happen coming up in the AFC playoffs. We will decide, this is per Tom Pelissero from the NFL Network, that Roger Goodell will determine the neutral site for the AFC Championship game if one is required. So they're not even going to decide where the neutral site game will take place until they need it, which is a little frustrating, but it is what it is. They'll figure that out when it comes to it, if it comes to it. But there's very few limited scenarios where we'd have to use the neutral site, but that will be used in the situation of a Chiefs-Bills AFC title game or a Bills-Bengals AFC title game. In any other AFC title game scenario, it is just be played at the home field of the higher seed. It's complicated. It's a little annoying. It's a little messy. Some people are not happy about it. This vote passed with the 24 count threshold, but it was the 24-25 yay votes. So a few teams did dissent, one of them being the Bengals, as they were trying to get some people to vote no certain parts of this resolution. But overall, it has passed. There's a potential for an AFC title game being in a neutral site. Is this the perfect answer? No, but I think in an unfair situation, this has spread the unfairness the most among most teams. We'll see how it goes going forward. We'll take a time out here on Mike Depp. Coming up next, Bill Williamson will join me to chat all things Raiders. All things Chiefs and Raiders, we bring in our good friend Bill Williamson, covers the Raiders for SB Nation, is covering football in its entirety for some 20-plus years now. You can follow Bill on Twitter at BWilliamsonNFL, and Bill will jump right into it here. Raiders made a lot of moves to try and win the AFC West, make the playoffs, win a playoff game this year. That obviously isn't going to come to fruition after a 6-10 start to this season, 6-11 start to the year. Just how would you assess how the season's gone for Las Vegas?
Well, it's been a bitter disappointment. This is a team that had, real designs of making a long playoff run. They went 10-7 last year. Got the man that Mark Davis wanted, and Josh McDaniels to be the head coach. Traded for Devontae Adams, giving up a first and a second. Signing Chandler Jones. This is supposed to be about a long playoff run and, getting the first playoff win in 20 years. But now they're 6-10. They can draft as high as number 6. It's just been an awful season, and they haven't had a lot of bad breaks. They have one of the easiest schedules in the league, and the opponents have fumbled a lot against the Raiders. Opponents have led the league, I believe, in missed field goals. They've had their opportunities, and so it's just not like it's just a snake bitten 6-10. They've earned this 6-10. 5 double-digit second half or halftime deficits, defeats. I mean, it's just a bitter disappointment.
With speaking of just how the season's been a bit of a disappointment here, Bill, for the Raiders this year. Derek Carr has been the center of a lot of this. Of course, he's been benched the final 2 games. There's a lot of speculation with a lot of steam behind it that he could be traded this offseason as the Raiders kind of hit a mini reset button here, and Josh McDaniels gets what would be, quote unquote, his guy at quarterback. How would you assess how Derek Carr has played this season? Because he's definitely played a step down from last year, but at times, though, he still has looked like a guy that, the Raiders can kind of depend on to at least try and lead them to some wins.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a complicated situation. This is a deal. He's been there 9 years. You can look at it as, why go for a 10th year for a guy who, lost a lot of games, been an average quarterback by definition. Because, there's some really bad quarterbacks who start in this league. If you look at a curve, he's probably anywhere from 12 to 15, but on the field during games, by definition, he's an average quarterback. And, they just haven't won with him. They gave him Devontae Adams. He has taken a bit of a step back with Josh McDaniels. Maybe that's his fault. Maybe that's Josh McDaniels' fault. There's accuracy issues, turnover issues, especially in the last month. And, a part of this is this, Mark Davis, who's, from what I've heard over the last few years, not a huge fan of Derek Carr, and he is standing by his head coach, who he just gave a lot of money to. So something has to be done, and it's going to be the quarterback who's taking the brunt. Is it fair? Maybe. Is it brutal? Yes, but that's the way it is, and the Raiders are going to be moving on at quarterback and stuff.
Sticking with the quarterback situation, and I know it's hard to prognosticate at this moment in time, but what do you think the Raiders might try and do at the quarterback spot if they trade away Derek Carr? Is there a free agent to be that you think they might go after? Do you think they try to find a way to move some draft capital around and get somebody in the draft? They do have, or projected to have, a top 10 pick in the draft this year based on their record. What do you think the Raiders try and do at quarterback next season?
I think it's all on the table. Tom Brady is certainly, we're going to hear him. Mark Davis wanted him 3 years ago when he was a free agent. Now, with the fact that Josh McDaniels, who he won multiple Super Bowls with, is in Las Vegas, so that's not going to stop those rumors. Jimmy Garoppolo is another one who has ties to Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels likes quarterbacks from his system, so those guys are going to be people he thinks about. Jarrett Stidham, who had a great game against the number 1 defense in the league in his first NFL start last week. He's a free agent. He's a possibility, and so are draft picks. So everything's on the table. Maybe the Raiders get some draft capital for Derek Carr, and say they have a 6th or 7th pick. Maybe they can move up to a top 3 pick. So that's a possibility. So everything is on the table, and the Raiders are going to be one of the teams to watch this offseason.
Josh McDaniels was brought in, and we've talked about him a lot here with the way he is part of trying to build his team here. This is his first season as a head coach here in Las Vegas, his first attempt at being a head coach since a very failed stint in Denver. How would you assess how Josh McDaniels has done at running the team and trying to get this ship where it needs to be? His first season there, leading the Raiders.
It's really easy, and it's cut and dry. He's done an awful job. Again, we're just saying that this is a playoff caliber team last year, and he just screwed it up, and they've blown 5 leads at halftime. That's on the coaching staff and him, of course. And they have Devontae Adams, they have Max Crosby, they have Josh Jacobs, who's going to win the rushing title. Those are 3 top 20 players in the NFL. And and they've taken a big step backward. So yeah, it's been an awful job by Josh McDaniels. Can he become a good head coach? Sure. Will he? I don't know. But what we've seen in Denver and Las Vegas so far is that he hasn't been one yet. And Mark Davis is not a very patient guy, but he has to. He's still paying. He had to pay out John Gruden a lot of money, so he's going to give him a chance. But yeah, McDaniels has to get it together really quickly.
Bill Williamson is our guest, covers the Las Vegas Raiders for SB Nations, covered the NFL for 20 plus years. You can follow him on Twitter at BWilliamsonNFL. I'm glad you brought up Josh Jacobs there, Bill. His 5th-year option was declined, and then he has proceeded to put on the best season of his career and just a great season overall. Like you said, is going to win the rushing title, leads the league in rush attempts. What have you made of just this resurgence from Josh Jacobs this year, and what do you think kind of brought this on? Is this just a classic of the contract year is undefeated, or do you think there's something else that has kind of opened up this next level of Josh Jacobs' game?
Well, he's always been pretty good, and you understand his decision not to give him the option because, it's the running back, and he wasn't top level, but now he's top level, and the Raiders are going to have a decision to make. Getting rid of Derek Carr's contract is going to give him some flexibility, so they might give him the franchise tag. That's not ideal after, it costs them money. It's going to be a lot more than the option, but, they're kind of stuck in a corner. If they don't give him the franchise tag and he goes to free agency, there's no reason for him to be loyal to the Raiders because they're the one who allowed him to go free agency a year early. And, somebody may give him a really nice contract because this year he's been an offensive changing back, and he's only still 24 years old. So that's another fascinating part of this offseason.
Let's move to the actual game coming up this weekend here, Bill. Chiefs and Raiders, second go around. The first one was an absolute dandy, 30-29. The Chiefs were able to win by single points. One of those games where the Raiders held a 17-plus point lead. They're up 17-0 before falling. The first thing I'll ask on an injury front, Josh Jacobs, we were just talking about him. Is he set to play this weekend? Will he play? I know there's been some murky information about his injury status. Do you think he'll suit up for the Raiders on Saturday?
Yeah, this is the 5th time in about 7 or 8 weeks that he's going into the game questionable. The thing that's different about it, there's 2 things that's different about it. That he hasn't practiced the last 2 games, and the Raiders are out of it playoff-wise, and he may not want to risk, getting further injury. The team may not want to risk him getting further injury. And he's got a huge lead on the rushing title. So I don't know. All those things make you think that point to possibly he doesn't play. But then on the other side, he's been so tough. He's come back from so many injuries this year. He may want to finish it out. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting tomorrow.
This was a game first go around. The Raiders scored 29 points against the Chiefs. They scored 34 under Jarrett Stidham last week against a very good, and like you said, top defense in the NFL in San Francisco 49ers. What do you feel is the avenue for the Raiders to try and win this football game? Because they're underdogs. They're 9-point underdogs. They're not favored pretty well at all. There are a lot of people writing them off. What do you feel is the avenue for the Raiders to pull off what would be an upset and take away Kansas City's chance of being the number 1 seed?
Yeah, they're capable of hanging with them. We saw that, right? They're taking it to them. But if the Chiefs lose this game, shame on them because they have so much to play for. I think the Raiders are going to need a little luck. They're going to need some sloppy play from the Chiefs. They're going to have to, not score touchdowns and not settle for field goals, which has been an issue this year, but it wasn't that big of an issue last week. And just, get a little luck, get some turnovers, and just hang in there. And it's possible. Look, I've covered 16 Raider games this year, and 13 of them have been absolutely ridiculous, going right down to the final minute. And I don't expect anything different this week. It's just that's what these Raiders are. They're good enough to compete, and they're bad enough to blow it. And we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if they win this game, though.
All right, Bill, my final question before I let you go, my friend. Chiefs Raiders, final prediction. Who do you think walks out of Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas the winner in this matchup on Saturday afternoon?
Well, I mean, because the Chiefs have so much going, so much on the line, and they are a better team. And the Raiders' defense has been awful, and it's kind of a bad matchup for their defense, of course. I would say the Chiefs winning a pretty entertaining game.
All right, thank you. You know what? For us here in this northwest part of this Kansas and closer to the Missouri area, we wouldn't mind that at all. Bill, thank you so much, my friend. Have a great weekend watching the Chiefs and Raiders, and I hope no matter what the outcome is, you can have a fun final game to watch for the 17th game of the season.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me.
That was Bill Williamson of SB Nation. Always good to have Bill on to chat Chiefs and Raiders. And there's two big parts of the Raiders going into next year I'm very intrigued by. One kind of is Josh Jacobs and what they do. They declined his fifth-year option earlier this year, which means this was his last year with the Raiders, at least under the current contract from his rookie year. Now, his fifth-year option, had it been picked up, would have been $8 million and some change. Essentially $8 million. Now, Bill makes a good point that if they unload Derek Carr's contract and there's a lot of cap situation and there's no one else they want to use it on, they could use the franchise tag on Josh Jacobs if they do not come to agreement on a new contract. Because you have to assume after this kind of a year, the Raiders might try and re-sign Josh. If they place the franchise tag on Josh Jacobs, that franchise tag is projected to be about $10.1 million. So first things first, above all else, Josh Jacobs just earned himself at least an extra $2 million. Like, at minimum, at the smallest amount, Josh Jacobs just made himself $2 million this year. Because they will have to pay him $10.1 next year instead of $8 million because they would use the franchise tag rather than his fifth-year option. What they end up doing, I don't know. I have to imagine they'll try and re-sign him with what they want to maybe do with the offense. The fact that the Raiders having a running game would be helpful, and just how well he's played this year. And Bill made a good point. There have been plenty of times that Josh Jacobs has shown potential as a runner. Just injuries and then other things have always gotten in the way of really seizing that full potential for Josh Jacobs. But overall, I have to imagine they'll do something to try and keep Josh Jacobs in the fall going into next season. And then we get to Derek Carr. Derek Carr, if they trade him before June 1st, they trade him, they release him, whatever. Even post June 1st, it works as well. If they do it post June 1st, the dead cap's just spread it over 2 years. But they save upwards of $24 million next year by trading Derek Carr. Now, that money guarantees his 2023 salary and $7.5 million of his 2024 salary, fully guarantees on February 15th of this year. Now, I don't know how that will fully affect the trade and some other things. I don't know. It's very complicated. This contract stuff, when stuff guarantees and what have you, very complicated. Just the big part of it is moving on from him saves them money. That's the be-all, end-all of what the actual amount ends up being. Moving on from Derek Carr saves them money. And this move they have done to bench him is signals that that's what they're going to do. Bill and I discussed a little bit of what that quarterback situation could be. I think he was right that all options are on the table. With their draft pick, they could draft one. I've made the joke plenty of times. Will Levis is probably going to be a Las Vegas Raider. He fits the profile of an NFL quarterback, though I don't think his stats are as good. Maybe, I don't know if his talent's actually where his projection should be, but he's a big physical guy. really tall, really well built. He looks like an NFL quarterback. And the Raiders being the Raiders and Mark Davis being Mark Davis, he's going to draft a guy because he looks like an NFL quarterback. And also the Raiders, if they are anything guaranteed in the draft, they draft people on their big board that no one else has. They had Clelin Ferrell 4th overall for some reason. Last year, they picked Alex Leatherwood in the first round. Look at how that went. So there's always an option what to do through the draft. Free agency is definitely an option with some of the quarterbacks available. There is going to be rumblings around Tom Brady. And if the Raiders are going to try and bring him in as their quarterback next year, I don't know if it's what they will do. Hell, I don't know if Brady would even want to consider that. Because if you're Brady at this point, you only want to, if you continue playing, which I think every year it will come down even closer to more of Brady hanging it up. He has openly said that he's now moving to, he'll, analyze those decisions when seasons are over. He's done analyzing those mid-seasons and answering those questions mid-season. But let's say Brady wants to play one more year and plays when he's 46. Why would he go to Las Vegas? I know that rumor's going to be there because Mark Davis wanted him round 1 3 years ago when this all first happened with Brady leaving New England. Mark Davis wanted him then. Josh McDaniels is there. Brady had some success with Josh McDaniels. But with how bad that defense is, do you want to go there and trust that the Raiders could overhaul that defense completely to where you could compete with the Chiefs and even the Chargers at this point? The Chargers are playing, they're a 10-plus win team. They're playing well. Would you really want to bank on the Raiders fixing enough of their problems in one offseason that you don't spend your age 46 season playing for a terrible team? We do have a texter in for the 913 that this did make me laugh regarding Brady and his not making a decision. The season's over. His season isn't over, question mark. Wasn't it weeks ago? Officially, yes. Not really. The Bucs are in the playoffs. The Bucs have won the NFC South, so technically you could argue it's over because they're not beating either Dallas or Philly, the two teams that they could play as the 5 seed. But technically, Brady's season isn't over yet. But I don't know what they'll do there. But that's always been the hot topic. But I don't think that's the way to go. Jimmy Garoppolo will be the next question. He has some experience with Josh McDaniels and the way they were together in New England. He's going to be a free agent. I doubt San Francisco is going to bring him back. Mainly for the simple fact of they have Trey Lance and apparently Brock Purdy. Again, I'm still not a big believer on Brock. That probably stems a little bit from how he played at Iowa State. But technically, they still have Brock Purdy as well. So Jimmy G is going to be a free agent. I think those are probably their top 2 options. And guys like Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, even Teddy Bridgewater, Daniel Jones, those guys are all technically free agents. I think Baker becomes the most available after that because I don't think the Rams would even think about, I don't know if the Rams are really going to try and re-sign him with the amount of money they have committed to Matt Stafford. I don't know if he's even a good option to replace Derek Carr. But the Raiders have a lot of questions at quarterback. That, I think, is going to be their number one question going into this offseason. Because as we've always talked about on the show, as we all know, quarterback is the most important position. It's the position you got to get right. The Raiders thought they had it with Derek Carr. I still kind of think he's probably their best option, but they're clearly going to go a different way. I don't know what that way is. We'll find out about it going forward. But Chiefs and Raiders this weekend, Jarrett Stidham's the one coming to town, is the one you're going to have to go face out in Las Vegas. I'm not that worried about it. But there's a lot of questions to the Raiders coming up this offseason that are going to start being asked in bunches at the conclusion of Chiefs Raiders on Saturday afternoon. Well, take a time out here on My Depth. We'll wrap up this noon hour coming up next. Wrapping up this noon hour of Mic'd Up on 580 WIBW. I wanted to end the hour on what is, in my opinion, a very good positive note. There were more updates about the Damar Hamlin situation coming out this morning, more medical updates for him. As of this morning, Damar Hamlin is off of intubation. He is off of any breathing assistance. He is breathing fully and completely on his own and is able to continue his slow recovery. And then this was my favorite part today. This is part of the reporting of Coley Harvey, an ESPN national reporter. He said earlier today, Bills head coach Sean McDermott told the team when they were meeting today that the coach had a surprise for them. Didn't know what it was. And then per McDermott, they opened the team meeting room. They had a big screen up. And Damar Hamlin popped up on the meeting screen for a FaceTime call they put up there. And the entire team was just overjoyed with a bunch of cheers. Damar told the boys that he loved him. He apparently also flexed on them virtually, which is just hilarious. But Damar is in great spirits. He is improving day by day, hour by hour, and it's great to hear. We've had nothing but positive notes. But the best note is that Damar is off intubation. He's breathing on his own. He is slowly but surely, powering through and getting there. I don't know if Damar's ever going to take a football field again, but the fact that Damar should be able to regain just his life and the way he can live his life is one of the most empowering things ever. And it's fantastic. And Damar has appreciated openly, said he appreciates the outpouring of love and support he has gotten. So great news out of the Damar Hamlin situation out there with our friends in Buffalo. That'll do it for this hour of Mic'd Up. Coming up next, we'll go around the NFL. Time for hour number 2 here on Mic'd Up on 580 WIBW. Fultoncaster here with you as we're just a little under halfway home on this Red Friday edition of the program. I want to thank Bill Williamson for coming on last hour, chatting all things Raiders with me. Always good to chat with Bill. We usually chat with him about twice a year with the Chiefs and the Raiders. Coming up in this 1 o'clock hour, we're going to go around the NFL, look at all of the potential playoff implicating games, which are the ones I suggest watching. Saturday, I think both games are worth watching. Obviously, we're going to watch Chiefs Raiders in this area. We enjoy it. Titans Jags is worth watching because of what's on the line. The game itself might not be as great, but what's on the line, important. And then I'll go through the games coming up on Sunday and discuss the playoff implications of the games that matter. And those, of course, are the games that I would suggest paying attention to, because playoff implication means fun football. We have Everyone Loves the List today. Worst uniform features. So Kyle and I are going to go through just features of uniform design that we think are terrible ideas. Which, as a broadcaster who has done play-by-play for games, you get opinions on this subject. We'll go through that for Everyone Loves the List today. And then coming on the bottom of this hour, we'll take a look at the college hoops landscape coming up on Saturday in the Big 12 with KU and K-State. And then a couple of big matchups coming up on Saturday afternoon. Also coming up later on the show in the 2 o'clock hour, Seth Keysor of the Chiefs in the North newsletter and The Athletic will join me. We're going to chat all things Chiefs and Raiders and a few other things with our good buddy Seth Keysor. We'll have On Second Thought, and we'll give a final prediction for Chiefs and Raiders coming up on Saturday afternoon. As always, if you want to be a part of the show, you can join me on the Big O Tires text line, 785-272-9429. And, of course, we're also live streaming on YouTube. You can go to youtube.com, go to Sports on 580 YouTube channel. Toss us a subscribe, if you will, if you're feeling generous. And you can watch the show live right there and also hop in on the live comment section of our YouTube live stream. Speaking of which, our buddy Vance had to ask me the question, so is my benevolent dictatorship coming to an end? It is. I want to thank you for calling it benevolent. Benevolent and dictator usually don't go in the same sentence, but I'll take the compliment. But yes, this is my last time kind of being the full man in charge here. Jake will be back on Monday, and everything will go back to business as usual with Jake and myself going back to a pair coming up on this show going forward. Which, got to tell you, doing 6 of these in a row by yourself, I'm so happy I have Kyle. I cannot express my thankfulness for Kyle enough for at least having some assistance to do this show. If I had to do 3 hours, 6 straight times, just me, which comes out to what, 18 hours? I can do math, right? That's a lot of work. That is a lot of work. So I'm ever more grateful to for Kyle, for Brendan when he came on Tuesday for Crosstalk, every single guest I've had this week for taking some of the load off of my shoulders. While Jake has been MIA gallivanting around the Southern Hemisphere. He'll be back Monday, though. He'll be back to join us, and we'll be back to a full crew here on Mic'd Up on 580 WIBW. But to kick off this hour of the program, we're going to go around the NFL, and there are, by my count, if my math is right yet again, 9 games coming up this week outside of Chiefs Raiders that I think are important enough because of the playoff implications each matchup could have. We're going to go through them. We're going to go through what implications they have on the playoff race and also, well, honestly, whether it'll be a good game or not. We'll start with the second game coming up on Saturday night, a 7:15 kickoff. It'll have Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, the big ESPN crew. The Chiefs, of course, will get Steve Levy, Louis Riddick, and Dan Orlovsky for their match coming up on ESPN on Saturday afternoon, which I'm cool with. Steve Levy ain't bad. I really enjoy Louis Riddick's analysis. And Dan Orlovsky is there to remind me that he once ran out the back of an end zone. I have nothing against Dan. I just also don't have anything for him. So I'm neutral on him. But it's funny to remember he once ran out the back of an end zone. And then also his tweet when Jimmy Garoppolo did the same thing of just exuberance of being vindicated that he was no longer the only quarterback that really had done that was also hilarious. But back to the main point, Titans and Jaguars coming up on Saturday evening. That game matters because that is an AFC South championship game. Winner of that game wins the South. Simple as that. You win, you get the 4 seed. That is where you are. You will host your wild card matchup. For the Titans as well, this is their only way into the playoffs. They must beat the Jags if they want to get into the playoffs. If they lose to the Jags, they're out. See ya. Go home. Figure out what you're doing the rest of your life there, Titans. For the Jaguars, if they lose, they are likely not in. For the Jags to lose, and still get in, they would need the Dolphins, the Patriots, and the Steelers to all lose, create a 4-way tie at 8 and 9, and then they would be the ones getting in to the big dance. But that is the most important matchup coming up on Saturday night after Chiefs and Raiders. Then we get into the AFC wildcard situation, which is down basically, again, the Jags technically alive, but with them being able to win the division, it gets a bit kind of wonky there. Even when they lose, it takes a lot for them to even not get it. For the Dolphins, the Patriots, and the Steelers, they're the 3 alive. The Patriots take on the Bills in Buffalo. The Jets and Dolphins are going at it in Miami. And the Browns and the Steelers are going at it in Pittsburgh. They are vying for that final 7th seed in the AFC playoffs. For New England, they have it easiest. Well, they have it simplest. They win, and they are in. But that also means they have to beat the Bills. They control their destiny the most. For Miami, they might have it easiest. Because for Miami, they just need a win and a Patriots loss, and they are in. Pittsburgh needs the most help because they need to beat the Browns and have both Miami and New England lose. Now, that all being said, there's some interesting implications to these matchups. Bills and Patriots are the ones going at it. It'd be hard for New England to win that game, so they're likely going to need the help of the Dolphins and the Steelers to keep their playoff hopes alive if they end up losing the game that they probably will lose, because they are double-digit dogs right now. For Miami, you would think that does benefit them because of the idea of if they win, New England loses, they're in. Well, there is a problem with that. If Miami wins, New England loses, they're in. But for Miami, their problem is they are not without their 2 technical top quarterbacks on the roster. Other reason to watch the Miami game, K-State legend Skylar Thompson will be making his NFL start against the Jets on Sunday. So Skylar Thompson's going to lead the Dolphins, against the Jets, which you would think makes it harder for Miami to win. However, the Jets are starting Joe Flacco because Mike White is out injured and they do not want to play Zach Wilson. Good Lord, I don't know why I could not say his name. Zach Wilson will not be playing in that Jets game because head coach Robert Saleh said there's nothing to gain by running him out there for one more game. They're just going to move on to 2023, which is also called just move on from Zach Wilson entirely. He's done. So that's the issue for Miami. In reality, I honestly think this. Pittsburgh might have it easiest because the Steelers have their entire team and they're facing a kind of bad Cleveland team. The Steelers could be a beneficiary to the Dolphins and the Patriots being in tough spots. Now, we do have a texter in from the 402 on the Bigger Tires text line saying Skylar Thompson could carry it to the fence to the win. That would be awesome. I can't lie. It'd be really cool to say the reason the Dolphins got in the playoffs is because Skylar Thompson got them there. That would be fun. However, I'm just pointing out that ain't easy. But that is what's going on for the final AFC wildcard spot. Then, of course, also if the Steelers were to lose, all 3 of the teams lose, and the Jags lose, the Jags get in as a wildcard team. But those are the 3 vying for that final wildcard spot. Those are the games worth really paying attention to in the AFC this weekend. Patriots, Bills, Jets, Dolphins, Steelers, Browns. I do want to make note of the Ravens-Bengals matchup this week because this is where part of the new proposal is just voted in today by the NFL owners comes into play. If the Ravens beat the Bengals And the Ravens face the Bengals in the wild card round, which by my math is guaranteed. Because if it would actually, it would take the Chargers losing for us to avoid this. But if the Ravens win and they face the Bengals in the wild card round, the site of that game will be determined by a coin flip, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. The reason for this is, had the Bengals lost to the Bills in the game that was ruled a no contest, and then the Ravens subsequently beat the Bengals in this matchup that's coming up this week, the Ravens would have won the division. And then it would have been the Ravens getting to host this game as the division winner. That's why there's some question marking if these two teams meet via the Ravens winning this game in the wild card round of changing the site. Do I think of an immediate good way to have this done to where we don't have a difficulty trying to decide this? I don't have a better way to decide the home field for that game. I still think the coin flip though is the stupidest idea. But that would happen if the Ravens beat the Bengals. So that game also worth monitoring. If the Bengals win, then we don't go to that stupid coin flip idea. So even more reasons to root for Joe Burrow. Which, you know me, I'm always a root for Joe Burrow guy. Except when he's playing the Chiefs. Then it's root for the Chiefs. Or when they need to lose for playoff positioning, then it's root for the team that needs to get them better playoff positioning. You know, those are the things. We had a good comment here on the YouTube live stream I'm going to get to right now from our good friend Barbara asking what time is the Dolphins-Jets game. Let me check that for our K-State fans listening. In case you want to try and find it. I do not know if it's going to be in our local market. I will warn everybody that now. I do not know. But if you could try and find it in the local market, Jets-Dolphins is a noon kick on Fox. I do not know if we will get that. I might try and find that information before our show ends today for those UK State fans that want to watch Skylar Thompson make his NFL start. I'll try and find that for you, but what you do need to know at least is that is a noon kick on Fox. If you're not watching it, you want to scroll the phone, scroll the ESPN app, just watch the Gamecast. Keep an eye on it at noon on Sunday is Dolphins and Jets. Let's go to the NFC for their playoff matchups and playoff implications coming up this weekend. The Eagles and the Cowboys are still fighting for the division and the number one seed because the Eagles have lost 2 straight games and the Cowboys have won 2 straight. If the Cowboys win their matchup against the Commanders coming up on Sunday and the Eagles lose to the Giants, the Dallas Cowboys will win the NFC East. And the Eagles will go from all year being the number one seed and fall to the 5th seed and must go on the road to face Tampa Bay. Now, if the Eagles win, then they are the number one seed no matter what. No matter what happens in any other game, Eagles win, they're the 1 seed, they get their bye. Now, let's say that Dallas does win and earns the division title because the Eagles loses. Then the number one seed becomes an interesting toss-up between either Dallas or San Francisco. If San Francisco beats Arizona, then the 49ers would be a 1 seed in that scenario. If the Cardinals beat San Francisco in this scenario, then the Dallas Cowboys are the number 1 seed. It is also worth noting for the Minnesota Vikings that they need to beat the Bears and have the Niners lose to the Cardinals, and the Minnesota Vikings can move up to the 2 line. That's just some seeding shenanigans in the NFC. Then there is what could be the most fun, which is the final NFC wildcard spot being up for grabs between 3 teams. The Seattle Seahawks, the Detroit Lions, and the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay has quite easily the simplest way in of any team. If Green Bay beats the Lions on Sunday Night Football, Green Bay is in, barring any other result. No other result matters. Green Bay wins, they are in. Simple as that. If the Seahawks lose to the Rams and the Lions beat the Packers on Sunday Night Football, the Dan Campbell-led Detroit Lions make it into the playoffs. And if the Seattle Seahawks win and the Packers lose, so Seahawks win, Lions win, then the Seahawks are into the NFL playoffs. which has led to some people think and question the point of putting the Lions and Packers on Sunday Night Football, because the Seahawks play earlier in the day at 3:25. If the Seahawks win, the Lions are eliminated before they take the field. To counter all of that, as always, as I said, I think even earlier this week, you think Dan Campbell's not going to have his team ready to even just play spoiler? You think that team with that coach isn't just going to get pure joy out of, even if they don't get to make the playoffs, they get to screw Aaron Rodgers out of the playoffs? Do not worry about Sunday Night Football being a battle between the Packers with something to fight for and the Lions with nothing to fight for. The Lions will fight hard enough on the basis alone of they get to screw over Aaron Rodgers, who has beat them for years. So those are the playoff matchups and playoff implications coming up. There's a lot still on the line. I like that for Week 18. So many of these games coming up this weekend have implications on, even if teams aren't getting in, they have implications on seeding. Only really 3 seed spots are locked. The AFC South winner gets the 4 seed. We don't know what team it is yet, but the AFC South winner gets the 4 seed. We know that for sure. The New York Giants are the 6th seed in the NFC. They will not move from that spot. That's why they might rest some starters against Philadelphia, because they have nothing to play for. Win or lose, they're in the same spot. And then the other thing we know for sure right now is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will be the number 4 seed in the NFC playoffs by virtue of winning their division and having an abysmal record. Nothing they can do can bump them up from the 4 line. Those are things we know, which means we have a lot of unknown coming into this weekend, which makes it fun. Games matter. A lot on the line this weekend. Very few teams are going to rest starters, which makes the games even better. That's the way it should be in Week 18. No matter what, it should be a fun one around the NFL this week. We're going to take a time out. Coming up next, time for Everyone Loves the List. It is time for Everyone Loves the List here on Mic'd Up on 580 WIBW. I bring in, of course, my good man Kyle Manthe, who's been helping me out so much over these last 6 days. We will do another round of Everyone Loves the List. Kyle, today's list, worst uniform features, things on uniforms, uniform design that we just hate and think are bad. Kyle, what's your number 4?
Some of these on this list are practical, some are design-based. This one's more design. I don't like jerseys that have the number or like the team logo on the shorts or pants. And
it's awful.
Baseball is the most common for this, but it just looks
it's stupid.
Tacky.
It's ridiculous. It's very stupid. No, I completely agree with you on that one, 100%. Number 4 for me. This has not happened a bunch, but the moment I saw it, I realized never do this again. If your color on your shorts, on basketball shorts, creates a differential halfway up, makes it look like you got a cummerbund going on. Remember when the Big 12 did that for all their tournament unis? Those were awful and stupid. Never do that ever again. No one has, and thank God they haven't. Don't give me like two-tone, a weird, like, don't make your belt a different color. Make it all pretty uniform with basketball shorts in particular. Don't give me a cummerbund look.
Yeah, you got to make it all flow together.
Yes.
No, number 3, I'm also sticking to basketball. The phase when they had sleeves, like t-shirt
so
basketball,
stupid.
It just doesn't fit.
No.
It looks bad.
I'm glad we're past that phase. I truly am. Number 3 for me, numbers on the front of baseball jerseys specifically. I don't like that look. I hate it. It looks really weird and awkward. I know there's plenty of teams that do it, and it's just, put it only on the back. I don't need to see it on the front. I just need it on the back. I don't need it on the front for baseball. I don't like it. It looks weird.
Number 2 for me, something I'm sure you can relate to with working at games, numbers that are hard to read or names that are hard to read. Specifically, I think gray is the worst. Just don't make your color gray. Don't make your name gray. Just avoid gray.
KU
white, black.
KU football for a long time had silver numbers on theirs. Hardest thing in the world to read when I was trying to call games. Horrible. No, I agree with you 100% on that. Number 2 for me, just weird font choices for numbers specifically. It makes it hard to read what the number is. Don't give me weird fonts. A lot of mine for me at this point are going to stem to readability from doing games. Don't give me weird fonts. Very basic block numbers. Very readable from a distance. That's what everyone should do.
My number 1, on the back of jerseys, the order should be the name on top, the number on the bottom. Some jerseys flip it up. It just looks silly. Put the bigger thing on the bottom and the smaller thing on top so it's easier to read.
100%. I agree with you there. I've seen that most egregiously in basketball. My number 1's very simple. Number, colors, matching jerseys. That goes back to readability, especially broadcasting games. Your number color should be extremely contrasting to your jersey. Simple as that. I will die on that hill. That'll do it for Everyone Loves the List today. Coming up next, we're going to go and look at some college hoops for KU and K-State coming up this weekend. Welcome back into Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. We have a texter in from the 785 with an opinion on our list today. Uniform feature that they think is terrible. The cup and sortable jockstrap. I I don't know how many people still use that. I do remember that existing. That's the piece of equipment that should probably be pretty standardized of not having an option to put some things certain places. And also just, it was outdated and probably not great. I don't know how much, I don't know anyone if they use it. I haven't played sports in so long. I don't know what's going on in the current range of sports. But I can't imagine it was fun. I can't imagine. I really can. If you have any thoughts on your takes on bad uniform design or bad uniform features, let us know on the Big O Tires text line, 785-272-9429. Or, of course, in the comments of our YouTube live stream. We are live on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, Sports on 580. Give us a subscribe if you haven't already. We would appreciate it. You can watch the show live, see our faces if you enjoy that kind of thing, see what we're wearing. I know a lot of people get really invested in what hats Dan and I wear. And sometimes Brendan. The reason I don't include Brendan fully in that is that he wears like the same hat for like 4 days in a row. And so like once you learn, you kind of know. But Dan and I changed it up. But all three of us have just very unique is what I would call them hats. And that is apparently becoming a very big hot. Like Dan yesterday rocked a vintage TCU baseball hat. Did look very nice. I will give him credit for that. So that's a benefit of watching this show on the live stream. You can see what we're wearing. Today I got my Wichita Wind Surge alternate team unis of the Wichita little boat racers. I can't remember what they called themselves. Turbo Tubs. I don't know. Not know why I could not find that name. The Turbo Tubs was an alternate name because minor league baseball is the best. I got that going on today with my little goblin driving the tub for Wichita. It's pretty awesome. It's one of my favorites. It truly is. I was happy to wear it today to cap off the solo run that I had going on. But going into this weekend of college basketball, there's some big games for KU and K-State coming up this weekend. Some tough matchups, both the Jayhawks and the Wildcats. And yet again, they play at the exact same time, which all I'm going to say, as somebody who needs to watch both, it is very difficult to split my attention. Because I'm going to watch KU because it's my alma mater. It's where, I love KU. I love KU sports. So I'm going to watch KU basketball when it's on. It's what I'm going to do. But Kansas State basketball is very important for my job. KU also kind of important for my job. K-State a little more because we are more of a K-State station than KU station. KU, we still give you love around here. But we are the home for a lot of K-State athletics. So I got to know. It's a small thing to vent about. Before I get into the games, it's just a ventable thing. Stop playing their games at the exact same time. It means I got to bust out more screens. Because also, I will let everybody know, for these that are also Chiefs fans out there, Chiefs and Raiders are scheduled for a 3:30 kickoff on ESPN on Saturday afternoon. Well, K-State and KU tip off at 5, which means there will be overlap. Which means on Saturday at one point, I will have 3 screens going, and please no one judge me. I will have KU, K-State, and the Chiefs all on at one time and attempting to divide my attention amongst all those. I can imagine Brendan might be the same way. I don't know if he'll go the full 3-screen experience. Brendan, though, has to, clear that with his wife to make sure he can have the 3 screens out. Or at least I assume there's like some kind of compromise they have to make there. I don't know how that works. But either way, my benefit is I don't have to ask anyone about my 3 screens. There's a lot of advantages, disadvantages to some things. I don't have to ask about my 3 screens. But either way, there's a lot of different things you have to do going up for this KU K-State matchup. It's going to be very difficult. Either way, back into the actual sporting event of the matter and the sports coming up on Saturday. KU takes on West Virginia on the road. They are headed to Morgantown for a tough matchup with the Mountaineers. The Mountaineers, a team that K-State defeated in overtime, but Bob Huggins' team is playing very well this year. They're one of those top 37 teams in KenPom that we've been discussing with how tough the Big 12 conference is. They are 10-4 on the season. Thus far is West Virginia. They have lost their 2 conference games thus far. They lost it Saturday and Monday. They lost 82-76 in overtime to Kansas State on December 31st. And then on January 2nd, this past Monday, they lost 67-60 to Oklahoma State. So they're still searching for their first Big 12 win. And it's not going to be easy. They get their next 2 games at home, but it's KU and then it is Baylor is who they're set to take on. But KU West Virginia, it should be a fun game. It's going to be a tough matchup. Bob Huggins always has a tough defensive-minded West Virginia Mountaineers squad in this matchup. It is going to be difficult for KU. They should, though, be at full strength. We'll see what they do coming off of their big win against Texas Tech. Another tough win there after DeJuan Harris had his 18 points, his career high 18 points, his career high 5 3-pointers. See if KU can ride the momentum of that game going into their matchup against West Virginia coming up on Saturday night. Because after that matchup, KU then gets to come back home taking on Iowa State before they Oklahoma first, pardon me, and then Iowa State before they get set for a match against Kansas State coming up in a couple of weeks, which should be a lot of fun. That first KU K-State Sunflower Showdown on the hardwood this year should definitely be a very fun matchup coming up this year. The question for KU coming against West Virginia is a simple one. Can their shooting keep up and keep up a good offensive pace? And then what I believe drives the Kansas team is defensive intensity. That seems to be a mark when they really get ready for their runs, when they get ready to really lock in, when they start taking over games. To me, it is often this year started at the defensive end. So can they do that against West Virginia? And if you're the Mountaineers, you've had a little bit of an issue scoring. You've played pretty well defensively, but you had those games where you've had to rally. You had the 11-point halftime lead against K-State. You blew that, got it back to overtime, but then fell in overtime. You weren't able to take down Oklahoma State, only scoring 60 points in that matchup. How does West Virginia's offense fare in this match will be interesting as well. For the Kansas State Wildcats, they have what could be considered the more fun of the two matches with storylines, but also potentially the tougher task. K-State is headed down to Waco on Saturday. They're going to take on the 19th ranked Baylor Bears on Saturday evening, 5 o'clock tip on ESPN Plus. Between them and Scott Drew's Baylor Bears, it'll be obviously the first time that Jerome Tang has returned to Waco since becoming the head coach of the Kansas State Wildcats. Our good friend Kellis Robinette of the Wichita Eagle and Kansas City Star has written a bit about this and discussed a little bit about it so far this week. He believes, and I agree with him, that this will probably be the friendliest coaching rivalry in the entire Big 12. These two dudes, Scott Drew and Jerome Tang, still incredibly close. Jerome Tang was an assistant for Scott Drew for 20 years. He was on that bench for a long time, learning under Scott Drew, waiting for the right time to go take his own head coaching opportunity. These two men are very close. They also know each other incredibly well. So I think also this matchup between K-State and Baylor this weekend is going to be so tight and so close. K-State is having a dream start to the year, better than I think anyone could have predicted. They are 13-1. They are 2-0 in the conference. I believe, if I remember correctly, their over-under win total was around 17 to 18 wins, was their win total when this season began. They're almost clearing that already. Like, what K-State has done, the start to the year that they have had, the way that they have played is tremendous. What they've done is amazing. It's nothing short of an excellent coaching job by Jerome Tang, because as I've said numerous times, and I will keep saying on this program, K-State is playing with a team of guys that had not played basketball together as a team until like July. In a very short amount of time, he has created a unity amongst this entire team. He's really started figuring out his bench, what about 8 total players he ends up using. Usually he's about his 5 in rotation. And then about 3 to 4 off the bench every game. It's not an absurdly deep rotation for Jerome Tang, but it's been a productive one trying to figure it out. The stars of this team are obviously Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. And for K-State coming up against Baylor on Saturday, the biggest things I want to look at is you're coming off of a game where you scored 116 points. It's not going to be as easy as that against Baylor. Not really on the margins of Baylor being that much better of a defensive team than Texas, because Texas was, putting into that game, a very good defensive team. It's the odds you're going to get as many open looks as you did against Texas, against Baylor, are low. To get them any open, easy looks is difficult in back-to-back games. So how do they respond to what is probably going to be a bit of a tougher offensive night against Baylor? How tough does that night become? Are they able to battle through potential shooting slumps? And then it comes down to as well, they need to be locked in much better defensively than against Texas. It was great that they scored 116 points against the Texas Longhorns. That was awesome. That was fantastic. It was great to see. They also gave up 103. That I don't think can be lost I think that can be lost, pardon me, in the sea of what happened that we don't think about. We just focus on the great offensive night. We don't look at how it was actually a pretty poor defensive night because they gave up 103 to Texas. Now, part of that is just there were so many possessions in that game. It was such a fast-paced game that points are just going to happen. I hope we can see a better defensive effort from K-State against Baylor. And this is a Baylor team that is not like the Baylor teams of old. This is not a classic Scott Drew powerhouse. Baylor is 10-4 on this season so far this year. They already have 4 losses. They've lost to Virginia. They lost big by 26 points to Marquette. And they're 0-2 in the conference. They lost to Iowa State by 15. And they lost that 1-point game to TCU. This is a beatable Baylor team. I know last week when I was discussing this stretch for K-State, I've said it a couple times this week already. This is the stretch where we were going to learn a ton about K-State, a ton about what they're trying to do, a ton about what they are made of. Well, if you can move to 14-1, 3-0 in the conference, that's insane. That'd be a great thing to see if you could win round 1 with Scott Drew. That's not even just a big thing and a nice feather in the cap for Jerome Tang, being able to beat his old mentor the first go-round. That would be awesome in and of itself. But the position it places you in the standings and in the hierarchy of the Big 12 is much more important. The number one thing, though, like I said, is going to be how does the offense respond in this one? Because you're not going to have a similar night like you did against Texas. If you're Marquise Noel, you're probably not dropping 36 points. Maybe you do. That'd be awesome to see again. Mike Miles got 33 against Baylor in their last contest. But things are probably going to become more difficult to you. How does Jerome's team battle through this? I've talked about all season. My biggest question mark for K-State that's still trying to be answered is how fluid can K-State's half-court offense be when they're not getting to just run up and down the court, when they're not getting easy, wide-open looks? How well can they just run a half-court offense? When they have to run in the most traditional and basic of ways, how can they do it? How can they execute? There's still a lot of questions around that. I think it is still really their true weakness as a team and where they might hit their biggest slides. Now, with Keontae Johnson playing as well as he is, they do have that bucket getter, late shot clock where someone just needs to create. They have that with Keontae Johnson. He can at least try. But overall, there are still those question marks about K-State that do need to be answered and need to be discussed for this team in this game coming up against Baylor on Saturday afternoon. But I can't lie to you. If we join you on Monday and we can be able to discuss a 14-1, 3-0 in the conference Kansas State team, well, we might be talking about a ranked Wildcat squad. I think even if they lose to Baylor, it still might be a ranked Wildcat squad. They've been receiving a lot of votes as of late with the way they've been playing. If they lose a close one to a good Baylor team, maybe not as great as years past, but still a pretty good Baylor team, if they lose a close one, that's still worth meriting that they might be in the realm of being ranked next week, which this K-State team, preseason thoughts, all encompassing. If you had told me this K-State team in January would be a ranked top 25 team, which is very much moving towards a potential reality, I would have called you crazy. Not because I want K-State to fail, not because I want anything bad to happen to them, but because just the things that would have to go right to have that happen when they play in the toughest conference in college basketball is a lot. And they've gotten here not because they've gotten a million lucky breaks to fall their way, but because they are very well coached. Jerome Tang is showing already to very much be the right guy for the job. And these guys are playing so much better and more together than I honestly would have expected by this point. It's great to see. I think both matches will be really fun coming up on Saturday. I hope on Monday we can come back here and we're just going to win by both K-State and KU in their respective road matchups, when then they both get to come home and hopefully get to keep up their winning ways. We'll take a time out here on Mic'd Up. We'll wrap up the 1 o'clock hour coming up next. I didn't think I would get to discuss KU football so soon, but there was some KU football news that broke. Just a pair of KU football things that broke regarding what's going on for them next season. First things first, defensive end Lonnie Phelps, the transfer from Miami of Ohio, announced yesterday on his Instagram that he is going to declare for the NFL draft and forgo another season at KU. A big loss for the Jayhawks. We're hopefully expecting to have his services back, but he will be going to the NFL draft. He will probably be an undrafted free agent. He is very raw as a pass rusher, but Lonnie has an opportunity to play at the next level. He is reportedly already headed to Arizona to begin training for the draft. I don't blame him. And I wish Lonnie nothing but the best. And then this came out today on his Instagram page and on Twitter. Jason Bean, who I thought was gone. Gonzo, he's out of here. He's either going to go play for somebody else or his football career is done. Jason Bean announced today that he is coming back to Kansas for one more year. It will be his final year of college eligibility. This is burning all the eligibility that he has. But Jason Bean is back. It is something that when I was on Crosstalk with Brendan and Dan yesterday afternoon, at about 4 o'clock on 580 Sports Talk, Brendan asked me about what I think if he decided to come back, because that's when the rumblings really began. And now it's been confirmed today. I'll tell you all the same thing I said on 580 Sports Talk yesterday for Crosstalk. One, I'm always happy to have Jason back. That's awesome. I liked Jason Bean. I didn't like that his career had to end, looked like it was going to end, or at least his KU career at least was going to end on that errant pass in the bowl game. I'm still grateful he's back. I wonder what they're going to do for him positionally. If he knows if he stays at quarterback, he is QB2. They might design a few random packages, but for the most part, he is a backup if he stays at quarterback. I discussed this with Brendan, and Brendan asked me about this yesterday. Would they consider moving him to a different position if he has aspirations at playing at the next level? If he wants to be an NFL player, he has to understand that won't happen at quarterback. He just does not have the consistent throwing abilities to be an NFL quarterback at the next level. It doesn't happen. He can't even be a starting quarterback at the college level. But he has such good athleticism. As I've always said, it's that elite top-end straight line speed that teams usually want. I wonder if Jason Bean will flirt with a position change and move to either running back or wide receiver. Former KU quarterback Torrey Loughlin has moved fully to running back the past few seasons. He's done some great stuff there. There's been a history of quarterbacks turned wide receivers, not just the KU, but across the NFL. But Kale Pick used to be a quarterback. He moved to wide receiver. It worked out fairly well. Most notably, Kerry Meyer was the quarterback before Todd Reesing really had his ascent, and Kerry Meyer moved to wide receiver. So there's options. There's different things in place. I think being what's best for him, or at least what I think could be best for him, I won't decide what truly is best for him. That's for him to decide. I think if he really has aspirations of playing in the NFL, moving to wide receiver or moving to running back could help him this year, and give him a shot at 1 year of really showing those skills, because I think he has the athleticism to at least attempt to be that at the next level, among different things. But no matter what, Jason Bean is officially back for KU. He's going to come back for one more season for the Jayhawks. I'm happy to see him back, whatever it is. I hope that he can hopefully have a happier note to end on than that errant pass in the bowl game. When like I said back then, I still believe he shouldn't have even put in that position. But nonetheless, it's nice to see Jason Bean back, and he'll be back with the Jayhawks next season. We'll see where he plays on the football field when spring practices and more things roll around as we move into later parts of this year. That'll do it for the 1 o'clock hour. I'm mic'd up. Coming up to kick the 2 o'clock hour off, Seth Keysor will join me from The Athletic. It is time for the final hour of Mic'd Up here on a Red Friday edition on 580 WIBW. 1 hour left to take us home and prepare us for the Chiefs and the Raiders, who are set to go at it coming up on Saturday afternoon. As always, if you want to be a part of the show today, you can hop in on the Bigger Tires text line, 785-272-9429, or join us live on our YouTube live stream. Go to youtube.com. Go to Sports on 580. Toss us subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And you can watch the live video feed of the show and also join in on the live comment section as well. We got On Second Thought coming up later, part of this hour. I'll give you my final predictions and final thoughts on the Chiefs and the Raiders. And speaking of the Chiefs-Raiders matchup this weekend, we will kick off this hour by bringing in our good friend Seth Keysor of the Chief of the North newsletter, also sometimes writes for The Athletic. The Chief of the North newsletter is one of the best subscriptions, I can honestly say. This is not even just a plug because I enjoy, it's not just a plug because Seth's joining us. I legitimately really enjoy Seth's work. It is fantastic work at the Chief of the North newsletter. Just look it up. It's on Substack. It's a great subscription. It is worth any little penny you pay for it. It is great stuff, great content. You can find great stuff on it, as always. Seth, though, my friend, I bring you on, and we're going to start here with the biggest news that came out today with this NFL playoff scenarios and the decisions they made on the AFC seeding process. How do you think the Chiefs made it out with all the decisions that have been made regarding neutral sites and decisions on how the one seed goes? Just where do you think Kansas City falls in how they made out on this whole decision process by the NFL owners?
You know, there's just so much to determine. I'm actually kind of trying to sift through right now and determine every single, consequence for the Chiefs, potential outcomes versus what potential outcomes were previously. There's a few moving parts here. I think the biggest thing is that, the Chiefs have an opportunity at the one seed without the Bills being required to lose in one of their games. which is a decided advantage for them. Now, it's not an advantage that they asked for or created, but it is an advantage. However, they are also, unless Buffalo loses Sunday and the Chiefs win Saturday, they are also not being afforded an opportunity to have home field advantage throughout, be a true number one seed, I guess would be the way to frame it, right? They're not going to have that opportunity necessarily because of, again, the no contest, the non-existent game. And there was never going to be a perfect solution as soon as it was decided not to replay the game, which is understandable. There's a lot of reasons not to in terms of scheduling, never mind the human element. But so there's never going to be a perfect solution. And so then the question is, what do you do? It's going to affect some teams. Who should it affect the most? And there's never going to be a totally fair solution. And so the one that they came up with, I think, and again, I'm still going to kind of go through everything. I think changing the rules midstream, mid-season, and asking for a vote from owners, some of whom have a vested interest in it, and then others who don't have a vested interest in it, but have a vested interest in kind of going along with the flow, because there's only a few teams that are hurt by it. That's where I think it gets a little screwy, just because there's only, 3 or 4 teams that suffer a negative consequence because of this. And so I don't, like I said, there's just a lot of moving parts here, right? Like, there was never going to be a perfect solution, but the Chiefs they are one of the teams that does get, in a sense, a benefit based on a non-event. And so it could be worse because the Bengals, on the other hand, they don't really get many benefits at all and are harmed in several ways. So, I mean, if there's a team that should be really upset about what's happening here, it's the Bengals. And whereas the Chiefs, I think it kind of turns out a little bit even, like it hurts them a little, but it also helps a little. So maybe that balances out, if all that makes sense.
Listen, Seth, I'm with you. I've been trying to make heads or tails of this on the show all day today, and there are so many moving parts and so many different things. No, I'm with you. I think the Chiefs kind of come out ahead in the fact that they now all of a sudden control their own destiny for that one seed and that bye at the expense of, you might not play the Bills at Arrowhead. You might just have to play them at a neutral site. And I think the Bengals are the ones that get the most raw end of the deal, mainly. And we're going to mainly talk about the Chiefs here today, Seth, but I just want to get your opinion on this. The whole coin flip thing that will end up being used if the Ravens beat the Bengals and they meet in the wild card round. I get that the Ravens would have a gripe for the AFC North title if they beat the Bengals, because if they had lost the Bills, then all of a sudden that changes. But is the coin flip, like, I know this is a hard situation to go through, but is the coin flip really the best way to decide where we're playing a football game?
It seems like it's at least as random as any. And I think that's what they're going for is that's as fair as it can get, is a 50-50 shot. What's that line from the Joker in The Dark Knight, And you know what the thing about chaos is? It's fair. And that feels kind of like the direction the NFL is going. I think the minute the NFL made a decision that they did not want the Bills to be overly penalized for that, that game ending in a no contest. And that appears to be, what one of the impetuses behind this decision is. They didn't want the Bills, especially, because I would say the Bills and the Bengals, but the Bengals kind of got the worst end of things. So it's hard to say that the league's priority was that the Bengals not get penalized, because they were one of the two teams, right? And they really do, more so than anyone else, get the worst end of the stick. So I think once the league decided, hey, we will not just do the regular rules. We're not just going to do winning percentage, because we don't think that would be morally right because of, what happened and all that. The minute they made that decision, that meant that multiple teams were going to be negatively and or positively affected. And so I guess, once you throw that out there, it does get a little bit random. So if you've decided to start from that spot, which I think the league started from, I think this is about as fair as they could probably make it. And there's a bunch of there's a bunch of things, fans of the Bills and the Bengals are upset with Chiefs right now. Well, they didn't earn it because the Bills and the Bengals both beat them. It's worth noting, the playoff seeding isn't decided by head-to-head record unless there's a tiebreaker. That's why the Browns aren't getting into the playoffs above the Bengals, right? And that's why, the Bills, they've lost games that they shouldn't lose too. That's why the Colts aren't getting in ahead of the Chiefs. Head-to-head record is only relevant in a certain thing. And it's going to be an interesting scenario if the Chiefs win Saturday, which I think the Raiders are going to give them a really good game. They could be a team that wins 14 games and have people say, well, you don't deserve the 1 seed. I think if you win 14 games in the NFL, you've earned the 1 seed.
Hey, Seth, I'm right there in lockstep with you. If you win 14 games, I'd have to imagine you've done at least pretty much a lot of work to try and win the number 1 seed. Also, on the point, I know that I've also seen the same things of people saying, well, the Bills and Bengals beat them, so why should the Chiefs get it? They also lost that game by a combined total of 7, those 2 games, by a combined total of 7 points. It's not as if they were blowout losses anyways, either way. Let's go into the Chiefs here. Chiefs and Raiders coming up on Saturday. I want to take a brief look back at Chiefs and Broncos because your most recent article in the Chief in the North newsletter was another one of your great Patrons film breakdowns, which are a great way to kind of go beyond just the box score what Mahomes does. I was at that game and had some of the thoughts that you laid out there of it's a game where he finished with over 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. It looked great. Box score wise looked great. But yet we're talking about his downfield inaccuracies, just discussing Mahomes and some of the issues he might have had there against Denver last Sunday. Is any of that something you're worried about going forward? Or do you think that was just Mahomes kind of got out of whack briefly, but he'll be fine going forward?
I didn't see anything that would necessarily mean that made me afraid for the future. Something that would kind of freak me out a little would be had he looked extremely gimpy, and that was the reason. Or if Marquez Valdez-Scantling was just running terrible routes, and that was the reason, right? These things that might have a long-term impact because it's not just a few bad plays. And so a few things that I looked at that I can dispel people of, Mahomes was still throwing accurate passes after he got his legs kind of rolled up on a little, but not too bad. And he was also running around just fine afterward. So he didn't look physically out of sorts. In the third quarter, he looked like his feet got away from him, though, in terms of, and that could have been because the roll up, although it didn't start happening right afterward. It could have been because of, you miss a couple plays and then it snowballs, which isn't something that usually happens to him, but it's happened before. We saw it happen against Cincinnati in the AFC Championship. It just seemed to be, and it wasn't just Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He missed a couple throws to Kelsey that we've seen him make a million times. So it's not just go balls either, right? It's not just, oh man, Patrick Mahomes can't throw a go ball. He can't throw a stop and go. He was just missing throws that he normally hits. He missed Sky Moore on a throw he normally hits that Moore maybe should have caught, but was definitely a bad throw. I just think his feet got away from him. I think he started to press a little. And if there's one thing that we've seen from Mahomes a few times in his career do that negatively affects his play, it's when he starts to press. And what they did, what I wanted them to do, what I think everyone wanted them to do, was start running the ball because Isaiah Pacheco's a really good runner and the Chiefs offensive line runs the ball well. And I don't think it's a coincidence that on the drive they finally kind of snapped out of it. They opened up with a run. But they didn't just do that because they only ran the ball the one time. But because that's Andy Reid, right? It's like, hey, you need to really run the ball. Okay, fine, I'll run the ball once. And now it's 2nd and 4. And the whole Nate Taylor said this so well. Every play is available now on 2nd and 4. And that's what happens, I think, with Andy. Because I think so often we get frustrated because they'll have a good run on first down. It's like second and 4 or 2nd and 3. And you're like, man, that worked. Do it again. And what Andy sees is a playbook full of green lights that you can call literally any play because it's 2nd and 4. But what he did do is he didn't open up the playbook completely. What he did do was he called some really simple throws, really simple reads. Not necessarily easy throws because some of these, quick throws to the sideline, you got to be careful how you do them, but easy reads, right? You're not asking your quarterback to think. You're giving him almost like a mental break. And I do think that helped him get back into a groove, and I think that's why he finished the game stronger. So I'm not worried long term. It was just interesting to see him have a game where his accuracy struggled so much. By my charting, he threw more inaccurate passes in this game than he has in any game this year or last year.
Yeah, I noticed that when reading your piece earlier, that how inaccurate he was just so very surprising. But I'm with you. Kind of looking back on it, reading your work, I don't think it's something to be worried about much going forward. I'm glad you brought up the running game with Isaiah Pacheco, because I've loved what I've seen him as of late. He's had some great games as of late. But the Chiefs in that game against Denver, they threw the ball 42 times. They had 16 design runs overall. They had, between Pacheco and McKinnon and Ronald Jones, 12 runs on the day. We talk about all the time, the Chiefs don't need to be a 50-50 running passing team because they have the greatest quarterback in football in Patrick Mahomes. So you need to use that weapon and the talents that he brings you. But where do you think is this right balance for the Chiefs in running the football? And do you think they could find a way to at least try to be near that balance when it comes up to the playoffs, where you kind of do need to have some semblance of a running game to maybe take some of this pressure off of Patrick Mahomes to be so special?
I think that balance, and you make a great point, with the Chiefs, it's never going to be 50-50. For any NFL team, it should be like 60-40 at best. I mean, unless your quarterback is genuinely terrible and you've got like a transcendent running game, or, your quarterback's a huge part of the running game. And so, some of these are design runs by him, whatever. With those caveats, in the pass game is more efficient. We all know this. And with the Chiefs especially, it should be probably more like 65-35, maybe even 70-30, maybe sometimes 80-20. But situationally is where they need to understand the idea of balance. Attacking defenses is where you need to understand the idea of balance. They need to understand the idea of balance, not in the sense of a certain percentage, but in the sense of a balanced threat against an opposing defense. Are they playing, 5 guys in the box and having their linebackers 10 yards off the line of scrimmage? That's not a balanced defense. And if you're passing against that, that's not a balanced approach. The idea of balance to me means making teams make choices. Force them to make difficult decisions. And if you are not attacking defensive formations that are screaming, we can't defend the run this way, but we are cheating against the pass, you are not balancing that aspect of the game out. You're not forcing them to make tough decisions. You're allowing them to make you choose to throw into a tougher defense, right? So that, to me, is, I think, where they really need to figure that out. And the problem with that is it's situational. It's snap by snap, and it's drive by drive. And Andy Reid, who I believe is one of the greatest coaches in history, he is not as elite at snap by snap situational decisions as he is at play design and play calling. Because even his play calling, he's great at that, at attacking defenses, at designing and all that stuff. But feeling that flow of the moment, there's a reason, and he's improved his clock management, but that was kind of a punchline for years, because that in the moment flow, he has kind of gotten where he is by sticking with what he knows and being the same guy. After they won the Super Bowl, you always heard that, right? He's the same guy every day. He's the same guy in every situation, every training camp, every practice. The problem is not all situations are the same, and he might be a little slow to, because you're gonna, if you stick with what works, you might be a drive or two late, right? So rather than trying to help Mahomes, take a mental break or whatever, a couple drives sooner, they might do it a couple drives later. But the one thing I'm encouraged about, at least, is that they did it, as opposed to against Cincinnati in the playoffs, where they just didn't really do that. So then, it's kind of a bad news, good news thing, right?
It really is. And finding that balance, and I love the way you described that balance and doing it situationally is such a key for this team going forward. Seth Keysor is our guest of The Athletic and the Chief in the North the newsletter. You can follow Seth on Twitter at RealMNChiefsFan. Seth, let's move to the defensive side of the football here. And because you and I are very much on the same page of his importance, we're going to start here. Do you think Chris Jones should be the undisputed Defensive Player of the Year? And then more importantly, is his impact on the game for the Chiefs not being recognized enough by Chiefs fans or even nationally?
I think it's changed a little bit over the last few weeks. I do think that Chris Jones is one of 3 or 4 defensive players that should be in the conversation. Nick Bosa is a pretty obvious one. And you've got a few other guys that have really, Micah Parsons had a great year, although that defense has fallen off too. But there's a few guys that have had incredible years, and he's one of them. You stack up pressure on the quarterback. He's as good at it as anyone in the league. And doing that from the defensive tackle spot's incredibly hard to do. He also has that clutch gene, right? And that's why I've written about him several times the last couple of weeks, because 2 weeks in a row now, Chris Jones has called game for the Chiefs. He has made the play. And it's not like those are the only plays he's made in the game. But if you look at his timing and of when he makes these plays, third down, late in the game, these game-altering moments, it's consistently him. I think without Chris Jones, the Chiefs are probably, rather than being 13-3 currently, I think they're probably 10-6 if they have like an average defensive tackle there instead of Chris Jones. I don't even mean a bad player. I mean just an average one, because he has single-handedly made some incredibly important plays. If you look last week on that final drive of the game for Denver, they were driving. They only needed a field goal. They had all 3 timeouts. 3rd and 5, they try to run the ball to sneak an easy first down, and Jones recognizes it, makes the stop, setting up a do-or-die play where guess who picked up the sack? Chris Jones. So it's not even that sack that ends the game. It's the play before that is so crucial in setting up a do-or-die, and he does that. In terms of recognition, what I've noticed over the last couple of years is if I talk to, any of the people that cover the league nationally, especially people that focus on the trenches, your Brandon Thorns of the world, your Robert Mays of the world, Duke Manyweather, the Schwartz brothers, those guys talk about Jones and they're like, he's a monster, unblockable, one of the best defensive players in the league. He's a freak, all this stuff. It's locally, there's been a small but vocal segment of Chiefs fans that for years have viewed Jones as a good but not great player, or like one that doesn't show up in big moments for some reason. And that's where I think he is actually a little more underrated by his own fan base at times than the national narrative.
I'm perfectly with you. When this year began, Jake and myself, we were discussing Chris Jones, and Jake was in the camp of, he's not been as good as he could have been, or some contract things. And Jake was part of the camp of, maybe if he doesn't have a great year, you trade him or you find different ways. And now Chris Jones moved firmly into you don't get rid of him. You got to find a way to extend him to keep him around for quite some time. Moving to the defense as a whole here, Seth, the young secondary has been something I've been intrigued by all year long, with how many young guys have had to play and the different ways they've been tasked to do some things. They have a tough matchup coming up on Saturday against Devontae Adams. They'll have to battle him again, and there's usually going to be some tougher matchups coming on the playoffs with some of these receiver cores as well. Just at this point, coming into Week 18, how would you assess how this young secondary has done for the Chiefs this year?
They have been better than I expected. Especially when you consider that they traded away Rashad Fenton, who has been an okay corner for them for multiple years in a row. My assumption coming into this year, it would be Snead, Fenton, and McDuffie as your top 3 guys. And I was very nervous about how much they were relying on even McDuffie, who was a first rounder, let alone, significant playing time to Williams or Watson. Generally speaking, rookie corners are bad. And that's just how it is. And even if they're average, they go through some really big up and down swings. And even if they're good, they go through some really big up and down swings. Trent McDuffie has been a legitimately good corner. Now, he hasn't been a great one, but to be a legitimately good NFL corner as a rookie is so hard to do. And it's been unbelievably impressive to me. I think he's got the potential to be a genuinely, top 10, top 5 corner in the NFL. Feet are great. He's athletic. He plays physical. He understands route concepts. He's already a very good player, which is awesome. And as the years gone along, Jalen Watson was able to come onto the field immediately and not be a weakness. Josh Williams, after a few growing pains, he's on the field and he's not a weakness. And that might seem like a backhanded compliment, but for a rookie defender, that's a compliment. It's what I used to say about Mike Dana before he took another step forward this year, and I think he's been a little bit more than this. It's like, no, you can give that guy 300 snaps, and he's not a weak spot. For a rookie, that's about all you can ask for, especially if you're not talking about, top of the half of the first round kind of guys. And so I've been very impressed with them. There's going to be some inconsistency that comes with it in terms of rookies as you're seeing everything for the first time. But it's been really encouraging to see Cook getting increased snaps at safety. It's been great to see Williams and Watson kind of almost rotating as they try to figure out who is best in what situation. L'Jarius Sneed has taken another step forward this year. So they really have, the secondary has outperformed what I expected them to do. And I think has been a bright spot on a defense that's been inconsistent in some other areas.
I'm fully with you right there, Seth. I've loved what I've seen as some of these young guys. And yeah, they've been much better than I expected. I think much more consistent than I expected as well. My final 2 questions here for you, Seth. My 2 for the road. First things first, Chiefs Raiders coming up on Saturday. How do you think the game's going to go? And what's your prediction for Chiefs and Raiders?
The way I phrased it on Times Ours is the way I say it here. I think the Chiefs win, and I don't think it's going to be a lot of fun for Chiefs fans to watch. I think it's going to be stressful.
Would it be a Chiefs game if it wasn't at this point with the way the last few weeks have gone, though, Seth, if it wasn't a stressful experience?
Yeah, that's just how it goes. It's always going to be stressful. I just would love to relax during a game and just enjoy it. Like what it was looking like when they played Denver the first time a couple weeks back. I was like, oh, okay, I can just relax. I was in Florida at the time, vacationing with my family. And I was like, man, if this keeps up, I might turn off like the fourth quarter and, I'll review the film later and I'm going to go, hop in the pool. And then, Yeah, I think it's going to be stressful.
They had to make it difficult. Seth, before my last question, I will give you the advice I've given myself. When the Chiefs play a quote-unquote bad team, don't try to get stressed until the game is over and the bad team has won. Everything else before that point, just laugh it off and be like, yeah, the Chiefs still won at the end. I did it with Houston, was a great experience because I just laughed at all the problems that were happening. My final thing here for you, Seth, we do Everyone Loves the List, different little questions and topics we rank here. Our list today, bad uniform designs or uniform concepts that we don't like in sports. Is there anything you've seen on uniforms with the people who design uniforms that you just go, that is horrible to look at, or you don't like enjoying that feature of it? Is there anything that comes to mind for you?
I can't think of anything uniform-wise because you got to remember I'm very old and have no sense of style. But I will say, and this has nothing to do with uniforms, but it's an aesthetic thing. I don't remember what college has this, but the one that has the red field,
Eastern Washington.
In my eyes, I hate it with a passion. I can't even watch highlights. I could if I literally had to, but I'm just like, nope. There's no reason for me to watch this. It hurts. Now, obviously, I love red because Chiefs are in red, but don't make your field red. So that I hate with a burning passion.
That is fair, Seth. That field, I can't lie, is kind of hard to see. Seth, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation, my man. Enjoy Chiefs and Raiders this weekend, and hopefully it's not as stressful as I think it's going to be.
It sounds good. Thanks for having me.
No problem. That is Seth Keysor of The Athletic and Chief of the North Newsletter. Always love having Seth on. It's just a great time. Yeah, Eastern Washington's field can sometimes be a bit of a hard thing to look at. We'll take a time out here on Mic'd Up. Coming up next, it's time for On Second Thought. Time for On Second Thought here on Mic'd Up. Our weekly moment at the end of the week where usually it's Jake and myself, this week it's just me. Get a look back on something we've said, usually in the past week. We bend those rules every now and then. And discuss things we're just like, you know what? We were pretty wrong. For this week's On Second Thought, I'm going to bend the rules a tad. Because last week's On Second Thought was my year end On Second Thought. So it was, not what I had said that week, but I said the entire year. This week's On Second Thought, I am tweaking ever so slightly to something I said Friday. So, it was at the tail end of last week. And it was my thought that Georgia would steamroll Ohio State. Also, a little bit in there of that I thought Michigan would kind of get like a double-digit win over TCU. Definitely off there. But, I touted, and I'll add this because I was touting it on social media as well. I thought Ohio State, I didn't like the way they got into the playoff. It's nothing against them personally. I know it's not, it's not their, they didn't make the rules. They didn't, beg the committee to put them in. But I didn't particularly enjoy them getting in because they had got to sit at home championship weekend and USC was punished for losing their game. Now, USC then proceeded to lose to Tulane in one of the greatest things I've ever seen. So maybe they definitely weren't a fit for the college football playoff. But at the same time, TCU, Tulane, Willie Fritz, great story. Love Willie Fritz around here. Willie Fritz is awesome. But that all being said, I thought the last time that Ohio State played a physical team, they got steamrolled against Michigan, lost by 20 plus. And I was like, oh, Georgia's more physical than Michigan. Georgia's a better team than Michigan. So Georgia should roll. And what happened was a great semifinal game that came down to a final kick for Noah Ruggles that went just a bit outside. And it was a fantastic game for 4 quarters that required Georgia to have an 18-point fourth quarter to take a 1-point lead. Like, it was a great game. And I give Ohio State all the respect in the world. And I will openly admit, I was very, 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 very wrong. And thinking that Ohio State would get steamrolled by Georgia. I thought Georgia would be in the national title game. I thought Georgia would be the national champions. But I did not, at any level, think that Ohio State would put up the game that they did and the competitive nature that they did. That's correct to Ryan Day's Buckeye squad. I don't know what changes they'll make going forward, especially the fact that quarterback they're about to lose, C.J. Stroud. But Ohio State's earned my respect, and they definitely deserve to be there because of the fight that they put up against the potential national champions and at least the defending national champions. A minor on second thought to TCU and Michigan, like I said, because I thought Michigan would win the game as well. And that one I was just flat out wrong. I thought TCU would put up a fight. I thought they would keep it close for 3 quarters. I thought, though, that Michigan's physicality would win them out in the end, but there were some tremendous plays on defense by Ohio State. D. Winters had a Ray Lewis-type game with a pick 6 and another interception. He just had a great day and did some amazing things. And I'm intrigued by what TCU is going to look like against Georgia coming up on Monday night at SoFi Stadium. Because I think it'll be so interesting. I think that matchup, I remember we chatted with Paul Meyerberg yesterday about it, that game might become more of a shootout. Georgia has shown their comfortability in shootouts because they want to shoot out with Ohio State. But I think we might have an exciting and close game. I don't know if Georgia's going to cover a big spread. Because TCU, man, if for anything, every time it feels like counting this TCU team out, that it feels like, maybe TCU should be viewed as not being able to win. They fight. And I think that is the big identity for TCU this year is they fight. They fight like hell for Sonny Dykes, and they will give you an absolute battle for 4 quarters. No matter what, though, should be fun. But TCU, I'm sorry for thinking you'd lose. And Ohio State, I'm sorry for thinking you would get blown out. Those are my on-second thoughts for this week. We'll take another time out here on Mic'd Up. Coming up next, we'll take another look at Chiefs and Raiders and put a prediction together for the matchup on Saturday. Wrapping up this final hour of Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. Final hour of the show for the week. We made it. We are home. We have found our way to do it. And my run of being the solo authoritarian on Mic'd Up will also be coming to an end because Jake is back on Monday. If any of you think that I should become the new leader of Mic'd Up, I'm cool if anyone wants to make a petition. Basically tell Jake that he now has to listen to me. Actually, please don't do that. That means more responsibility gets put back on my shoulders, and that's the not fun part. I was messaging Jake the other night. He was asking how that was going, and as I told him, I was like, this has been kind of fun. But also, man, it's a lot of work just having to do all the work for the week yourself. I'm sorry for the time that I've made you do this, and we'll be making you do this later this year. When I go on my yearly vacation in July, I apologize in advance that I make you do this by yourself for a week. But at the same time, now I feel way less bad because you made me do it by myself for a week. So all is now fair. All is now completely fair between me and Jake LeBon. He'll be back on Monday. Wrapping up this final part of the show today, Chiefs and Raiders coming up on Saturday. Like Seth said, because I want to thank our good man Seth Keysor for coming on. Like Seth said, it's probably not going to be stress-free. Probably a game that's going to stress some people out and make Chiefs fans annoyed that they can't have a stress-free game. I will use this time to once again re-hit my point. Just try not to worry until the Chiefs officially lose. It's not easy. It's a rule I've broken myself. But it's really, it makes the viewing experience more fun. Because you start laughing at all the bad fortune at that point. Until it gets like it's close with like 4 minutes left, and then you really get stressed. But no matter what, it will probably be a close game because the Raiders are going to put up more of a fight than I expected. Because they put up a hell of a fight against San Francisco. They took the 49ers all the way to overtime last Sunday, losing on a field goal by Robbie Gould in OT to San Francisco. But they put up 34 points. Much better of an effort than I ever expected out of this Las Vegas Raiders team after they benched Derek Carr. I thought that would have been just the white flag. Just everybody kind of quitting, like, all right, guys, I'm out of here. They all pull a Jadeveon Clowney and just leave. Just in case you haven't heard, Jadeveon Clowney will not play for Cleveland coming up on Sunday. He was sent home and is not going to play because he criticized the team during practice and told his position coach that he was not going to play on any down other than third down. He said there was no reason to play on first or second down. Clowney then allegedly said that's due to an injury. And then there's disputing about does he even have an injury? But yeah, that's also just a fun side story that came out. But back to the Chiefs and the Raiders. They're putting a better fight than I thought. You still have to guard Devontae Adams, best wide receiver in football. It will not be easy. That's why my keys to this game are simple. Don't give up the big play. Keep a lid on Devontae Adams. Steve Spagnuolo, please, 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 can you not do press man with no safety help on Adams? It seems against star wide receivers, that's just what Spags does. He just loves to do it. I don't know why. It frustrates the ever-living crap out of me watching him do that. I see it lined up, and I watch it, and I'm like, this is going to end badly. The play begins. It ends badly, and I go, and I say to no one in my apartment, I say to my cat, yeah, told you so. Told you this is going to go bad. Don't do that this week. That is the thing that will give the Raiders life. It will give them an injection of belief and hope in themselves if they can hit those big shots in the game. Stay out in front of that. Find ways to not do that. I'm not saying it's simple. I'm not saying it's easy. I want to make that clear. I'm not saying it's simple or easy. But you got to find a way to keep a lid on the offense of Las Vegas. Make them drive that ball down the field. If they drive it, that's unfortunate, but you're at least making it harder to get points. If you let them pick up those 40, 50-yard chunk plays like they did when these two teams met in Kansas City, well, then you're making their life so much easier. Don't do that. Don't allow those easy plays to happen. And my second key was quite simple. Turnovers. If there is a way lesser competition stays in against better competition in football, like football specifically at all levels, it's turnovers. It's turning the football over and the worst team, the bad team, stealing possessions. You cannot, absolutely cannot do that against Las Vegas. The Raiders, last time the Chiefs played the Raiders, neither team turned the football over. And that's when all of a sudden the Chiefs' turnover problems started. And they had that string of a bunch of turnover-filled games. Get back to what you know you can do, which is not turning the football over. It's finding a way to play well, to play within yourselves, make those smart decisions. If any of you are running with the football, 2 hands, keep it tight, keep it high. Punt returners, field it cleanly. Dave Toub came out and basically has said, there was discussion of, with the Chiefs' muff problems, should they just be fair catching more, not always trying to do these run backs that have led to some fumbles that have popped out. And Dave Toub basically said, no, they're not going to change what they're doing. They know how to fix their problems within themselves. We'll see. But find a way. Just protect the football. If you're Mahomes, try not to force too many balls into tight windows. If a defender makes a great play and that's why the ball is intercepted, sometimes that just happens. If a ball is tipped by a receiver or someone else and that's how it's intercepted, sometimes that just happens. But at least try to make sure you're making confident decisions and proper decisions. I trust 15 to do that. There's a reason I call him often the best quarterback in football, because he is. I trust him to do that. But turnovers are another big key to this game that the Chiefs need to stay out in front of. My big chief for this game is Travis Kelce. He had the 4 touchdowns last time, but only had 7 catches overall for 27 yards. It was a very odd stat line. I think Travis can have another good game. I think Kelce can have a good game. Find his way to be that middle of the field target for the Chiefs. If their offense and passing game needs to get going and wants to find that rhythm again and really find that rhythm heading into the postseason, well, getting Kelce, the best tight end in football, going is always helpful. Little, subsection to all these points. I hope that the Chiefs can run the football a bit more effectively against Las Vegas. Their defense isn't great. Last time these two teams met, they did not have Isaiah Pacheco as integrated and as feeling as great as a runner that he does right now. Use him. Use the young man. He's talented. He's got all the traits that the Chiefs have been looking for in a running back for quite some time, and it's a blessing they found him in the 7th round. Andy, there's a balance to be found. As Seth and I were talking about, Andy Reid finding that balance is difficult. He's always going to lean towards passing the football. It's who he is. And he's going to be who he is when the chips are down. But finding that balance and finding those situational moments to make sure you run the football are also important. I don't know what this game's going to end up being. I think it will be close, not necessarily because the Chiefs play poorly or because, it's the Chiefs. They played close games lately, so they're going to make it stressful. I think the Raiders are going to just put up more of a fight than I ever expected. The Raiders are, I think, just going to fight harder than I thought because that's what they do. It's honestly impressive. I thought they would have rolled over. They would have just rolled over and played dead. I really thought they would have. But they're playing well, and I find that admirable, I guess, is the word I'd say, is that those players haven't given up. And no matter what you think of the Raiders, no matter your personal opinions, because you're a Chiefs fan, Chiefs fans don't like Raiders, all that stuff. I get it. I feel you. It's fun when the Raiders lose. I love making fun of them and laughing at them. But I respect any team that when what I believe is your coach is making a decision that says we don't care about winning anymore and we are giving up on our leader. And Derek Carr was a leader in that locker room. That is what he was. When your head coach and your front office basically make a decision that signals very much, this guy's not a part of our team anymore. We are getting rid of one of our leaders. When everyone's able to rally around your new guy in Jarrett Stidham and stay together as a team, that's commendable. It's not something I thought Las Vegas could do. I thought they'd be far too dysfunctional to do something like that. But I got to give them credit. They stayed together much more than I expected. Final score in this one, I think, will be interesting. I think the Chiefs are going to really be able to put up points in this contest. The Niners dropped 37 on this Raiders team, and this Raiders defense is never that good. Last time these two teams met, the Chiefs won 30-29, and I think you may have left some points on the board, particularly early. I think in this one, if I had to give you a prediction here, I'd probably go 34 to about 27 Chiefs beating the Raiders. I think the Raiders will be able to put up points. I think, as always, some of those points might come late when the game is kind of out of hand, if that ever happens at one point. But overall, I think this finishes near that kind of one possession mark. I do definitely, though, think the Chiefs will go well over 30 points in this contest because Patrick Mahomes, if there's any division opponent he plays well against, it's the Raiders. He has his most touchdown passes against any individual team. It's against the Las Vegas Raiders. 26 touchdowns, only 3 picks in his career against Las Vegas. I think he'll have another one of his classic great games against Las Vegas and the Raiders. And I think at the end of the day, they'll end with the Chiefs win. And when the Chiefs win, they'll be your number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. They might not get home field for some AFC championship games because of neutral sites and different chips falling in different places. But no matter what, they'll get the bye. And the bye week is the most important part of anything you earn in these playoff moments. You can rest, get healthy, and be good to go and have just one less game to have to win to reach the ultimate goal of racing Lombardi in Arizona at the end of this year. We'll take one final timeout. We'll wrap things up with a mic drop coming up next. It's time for the mic drop to wrap up this week's edition of Mic'd Up. Simply put, above all else, Chiefs and Raiders coming up this weekend. It's probably going to be stressful. More stressful than you want it to be. Find the way to figure it out. Just sit through it. Find a way. It's going to be okay. Chiefs should get the win, and when they get the win, we're able to join you on Monday. It was hopefully being able to say the Kansas City Chiefs have the number 1 seed in the AFC. And for the first time in quite a while, we won't have a Chiefs game to preview next week, hopefully, because they're getting much-deserved rest that they have earned by winning 14 games this season. One final note I do want to say as we wrap up this week of shows here on Mic'd Up, thank you so much for everybody's kind words. I've seen them all. I've seen the texts that have come in. I've seen the comments here. I've acknowledged some of them as they come in. I appreciate all of your support as this has been an interesting week. It's always different when a string of the shows have to be completely solo. It changes things up. It changes up the dynamic and the way things are done. It's a lot more of just my voice, a lot of my voice coming at you all for 6 consecutive shows with Jake on vacation. He'll be back Monday. We'll be back to a full crew. As I said earlier, I do want to thank my good man Kyle Manthe running the board today and running the board for me for the past 6 shows. It makes my life a lot easier when there's a lot of things that I don't have to worry about. And that is why we love having Kyle around and all his help. I want to thank all of our guests this week as well, especially thanking Seth Keysor and Bill Williamson coming on this week. It's been fun to be the only person running the show for 6 days, but I cannot lie. I'm about to be very, 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 very happy that Jake is back on Monday just to take a little bit of work off my plate and also for all of you to not to listen to just my voice be droning on for 3 hours a day for the shows coming up. Next week, we'll have our first 5-show week in a couple of weeks. No off days next week. We're with you Monday through Friday, but we'll be back with you on Monday. Jake will be back with us. It'll be a great time. Thank you all so much for joining me for this week's episodes of Mic'd Up right here on 580 WIBW. That does it for this week. Coming up next, 580 Sports Talk with Brendan and Dan.